On this episode of Creators Corners, we have Avon Fields Stables. Him and I have interacted quite a bit in many of the different Discord servers and has been a major help with assisting in running a lot of the community red tournaments, like the up and coming March Madness event, and has really been kind of behind the scenes. So it's been nice to see and really refreshing that he is going to be streaming more and he's been able to start creating content on his own. So I hope you enjoy our conversation and be sure to look out for more and more things coming from him.
Kyle from Avon Fields. How's it going?
It's going good, guys. How you doing?
I'm great. So, what made you decide to transition from stable owner to stable owner and content creator?
I think it was just I've always wanted to make content. I came from a FIFA background, and I would stream like through the PlayStation, like Twitch app through there.
Yeah.
And it was never to any kind of acclaim or really any kind of viewership, but more just to clip things, and I could at least record my streams, like break back footage, and like break down like why I was getting my butt kicked all the time in FIFA. But Zed came out, and it was such an easy thing to stream, quote unquote, in that like you don't really need a top end PC. It's not super demanding on processor space. So decided, you know what, let's kind of break into this and kind of see how it goes. And I like helping people. I like that community aspect, and I think it helps kind of keep me accountable. And it's more fun to race your horses if you're racing them with other people, I feel like, rather than just like sitting on the couch and running the horses and races while watching TV or whatnot. I'd much rather have that interactive experience and, talk about racing, talk about updates, things like that with people, rather than just kind of doing it on your own. So the community driven aspect was definitely a big pusher there.
Yeah, definitely the most fun I ever have is being on somebody else's stream, throwing horses in at the same time as the group, and having that immediate, interaction with everybody else. Because when you're just chucking in horses to get them in to qualify for a tournament, it kind of takes away the fun out of it.
Oh, totally. It gets monotonous at times. It almost feels more like a job, or especially if you're downclassing. Like there's nights on stream where I'm just downclassing horses, and if I can at least have like a conversation while I'm intentionally trying to lose, it makes that process of intentionally trying to lose way more tolerable.
So, how do you feel about downclassing since we're on the topic? Do you feel like it's a necessary evil? Do you feel like there's not a very good solution to it, so just keep it? Or
I think it's a necessary evil. I just think there's got to be a better way, and it wouldn't be as bad if I'm a big proponent of frees need to be taken totally out of like the consideration with paid, so that you can run your free races for tournament qualification. Because now, I mean, paids aren't remotely even impacting tournaments. So make the frees separate, and then your downclassing for your paid racing could be a totally separate funnel, and do it that way. I don't know if that really made sense or not, but basically
no,
separating the
it
two
kind of does.
ecosystems of free and paid. Your free races would be for tournament and wouldn't impact your fatigue as well. And then you could have two separate like elo funnels, if that makes sense.
No, I see what you're saying. So pretty much, kind of like what they've done, but take it one more step further to
Yep.
where if you have a class 4 paid grinder and you run him up into class 2 for a couple tournaments in a row, he can still run paids in class 4.
Yes, exactly. So maybe you've got maybe you're a class 3 horse in the tournament side of the bracket, but you're really a class 4 or class 5 horse in paids.
Yeah.
And then you can down class accordingly there with your paid racing fatigue, and then with your free racing fatigue, and just keep them separate. And then you bring back that paid atmosphere too. I think paid racing at an all-time low is bad for this ecosystem personally.
Yeah, it's really hard because I know they're trying to move to more an event-based structure because it gives them more creativity. It just with everything Zed, it's very hard to get through the transitions because
Yeah,
people are playing with real money, right? Like there's real money at stake, whether you're over invested or not. Um, it's still real dollars.
yeah. Well, and then you run into the issue of like, what do you do with your 1,600 and 2,000 meter horses? What do you do with your 1,000 and 1,400 meter runners? Because they
Mm-hmm.
basically lose all value, because your ability to get money in the pays where they could succeed is highly minimized. I mean, I average a weight in class 5 right now of almost an hour per 1,400 meter race. Like
Yeah.
I can't sit there for 10 hours a day to get my racing in. But that 1,400 meter horse isn't going to do anything in a tournament. So you basically de-evaluate the entire set of horses that aren't like tournament qualifiers and tournament winners.
Now, when did you come into Zed?
Late August. I got in
Late
late
August.
August. Yeah, right
Okay.
before, probably right before Labor Day.
Okay. So late August, that would be post odds removal?
The week I started was the week odds turned to flames.
Okay.
So
So
I never
you
really
didn't
knew.
have to relearn a new system.
Exactly.
Okay.
I saw all the blow up and all the people angry about how odds got changed and things like that. I personally like the odds change. I do think odds gave too much info. I mean, this has been brought up 100 times before, but like imagine an arbitrage if odds were still here.
Yeah,
They'd have every best horse after 5 races at that point.
yeah, and odds were, for some horses, they were cloudy and noisy. It's kind of weird. Like for the horses that it gave too much information, it gave way too much information.
Yeah.
And then for other horses, it just made them really hard to run.
Yep.
So I do think the heads up data the odds provided though was entirely too much. Like that was just dangerous, being able to essentially benchmark every single horse against the other. And since
Yeah. I
then
mean,
too, they've made racing adjustments, right? So like
exactly.
there's a lot that's moved since then.
And whether that was an intentional race adjustment or whether it was a consequence of changes they made that weren't really foreseen, who really knows the exact answer there? Only really Zed
Right.
does. But I think you're 100% right there. You could look at two horses that are 10 odds horses, and they could have totally different win rates and totally different ROIs, and they both have the exact same odds.
Yeah.
And you can find horses now. I was looking on Hawku the other day, like a horse that had 6 odds and 2,600 over like 30 races. But then I looked who those 30 races were against, and I don't think a single horse had over like a 30% flame rate
Yeah.
post odds. So it's kind of it's very tough to read there as well. You can muddy the waters in odds pretty quick as well.
Yeah. Now how so coming in, you missed odds, you got flames, and then we dove straight into fatigue too. So you didn't even get to race a whole lot pre-fatigue era.
Yeah, it was tough. I almost left, and that was actually a conversation we had on Twitter this week. When John Lee had posted about like backing out races, it's terrible for newcomers.
Mm.
I mean, I had 3 horses. I was running 9 races a day,
Yep.
and that was when like your 250 races were even a click fest at times. Like you were trying to cruise through and get into 250s, and they would fill like that. Like snap your fingers, a 250 race was filled. Um, so there would be times I'd race an hour and I was done for the day. I was done for
Yeah.
fatigue until 12 hours. So I think for newcomers, unless you have a newcomer coming in with, a half of an ETH, which I don't think is a typical newcomer into this game, um, it's tough because you're only getting their attention for a half hour, 45 minutes, and you don't really get the chance to get them hooked in that regard.
Yeah. No, it's definitely, Zed is not a place that's easily dabbled. You can lose a lot of time or money if you're just
Yes.
dipping your toes in and not taking the time to learn it.
Yeah, I think every game I think you play, like whether you're playing, an Xbox game, an NFT game, whatever you're doing, I think there's usually like a month to 2 month kind of learning curve until you're really comfortable. But I think the way it is now, that learning curve can be sped up a little bit because you're getting more experience racing. When you only
Hmm.
get 3 races a day, you're pushing that learning curve so much, and I think you're alienating a lot of those newcomers.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. How important has it been having community people that you can kind of reach out to and lean on, and all these micro communities to kind of help you get to where you're at? I know that's kind of something that's important to you now going forward.
Oh, I mean, I think it's huge. Zed is admittedly doing a better job now with some of their new member onboarding and things like that. But when I came in August, there was none of that. It was like, as Dan Sham would call it, it was kind of like the wild, wild west. Um, so I think having those people you can ask, and all the way from the top down, like I know I've messaged arbitrage before about a horse, like, hey, what do you think here? If I can hold here, can I run 5s and 10s? I've got a horse that basically flames anywhere from 18 to 22, so it makes it tough, and has a ton of variance at 24, but doesn't flame. So it's
Hmm.
kind of like, where would you run this horse? Is this a mid? Is this a marathon? So being able to ask, from the top all the way down, send them arbitrage a message. They may answer me. I'm not telling everyone to go out and message arbitrage because obviously, Kevin's is a busy guy and he's got a lot of stuff going on too. But like the fact you can message someone like that and get an answer same day, or just pop into one of the various Twitch streams and someone there is willing to help.
Yeah.
I think that's huge. And just in the fact that it helps grow the community, and it does let that newcomer know, like, hey, there are some, safe spaces where you can get good, reasonable advice. Um, that is going to help you build and grow versus having a situation where, in some other games, those people would just try and take the money and manipulate it and try and screw that person over. So I do think in general, the onboarding community here, Sangudo, Chateau, the Metaverse Gaming guys, MJ, Bot Lady, they all do a really good job of kind of bringing people in and kind of letting them learn under their wings and under their guidance.
Yeah, it's definitely been helpful. And like as a fellow content creator, like sometimes it is almost intimidating. Like I don't necessarily want to build out new player content because I feel like there's people who are doing it better than me. But at the same time, someone who might stumble upon my stuff might not stumble upon anybody else's for months. And then it's like, all right, well, do I build the new player content for the few people who are going to see it before they see anybody else's, or kind of how do you balance that, doing what other people are doing versus just kind of staying in your niche and letting the people better than you do what they do.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you there. I'm not going to do new player content because I know Chateau is going to do it 100 times better than I
Right.
can. And I'd much rather if someone asks me, be like, hey, I'm not going to say, hey, go look at my stuff because my stuff's going to be crap compared to what Chateau can bring out. So I think kind of staying in your own little niche, which for me, I kind of like, I'm starting to try and develop like good filters where you can find good steals on horses at pretty fair or even better than fair rates. I talked about this on the Evergreen podcast I did with him, but like I love the Finney exclusive filter. You can find some absolutely steals there in Finney exclusives, like under Z12s. Some of them with like 13-14% win rates for pretty cheap. Now it might be just a 250 grinder, but I think if you're a newcomer coming in, being able to get a horse that's a 15% win rate and a 250 grinder with a down button, you can build up a lot of ETH just running that horse every single day and build your stable that way. I think that's the best like base horse to start a stable with, because you're going to learn down classing. You're not going to be sitting here in $5 and $10 races getting your butt kicked by some of the big guys every day. You're going to learn a lot of those like base mechanics, and you've still got a shot with some of your Genesis breeds. You can still pop out some pretty good breeds with that, especially now that we're going to be able to pass down some of that variance, some of that distance preference versus just before it was base ability. And I think this is kind of in your vein of breeding too. I love those Finneys and exclusives, those Finney exclusives, because I feel like they've been bred enough that the base ability has been bred down to an extent. And if that horse is winning at that rate, 12, 13, 14, sometimes 15%, they're winning because they have great distance preference or because they have great variance. And that horse with those two qualities is going to be able to be downclassed.
Yeah, and even if they, because one of the things we've seen is every single breed cycle, the level of capable horses seems to grow exponentially.
Yeah.
Because and obviously it makes sense that it's going to, but it seems like it's happening much faster than any of us expected. If you can get something that can win today in any type of paid environment, it will most likely survive tournament environment for the next several months. And like it's not as much fun, as we talked about, just grinding up and down buttons and freeze. But if it gives you the understanding of the game, to learn the base mechanics, to then make an educated decision for a more expensive purchase. Like I think that's probably the most underrated aspect of the game, is just actually understanding it. Because I think I freaking researched and did data dives and looked up horses for 2 months waiting for drops to happen before I bought my first horse. Bought a horse, thought I knew exactly what I was doing. It took me 120 races to win my first race. So it doesn't matter how much research you do unless you're an actual, computer science guy that can go into some crazy data that I can't, or, build tables that I can't. Like you have to play the game. You have to get the reps in to actually see what it's all about. And different environments have different parameters, right? Like you came in could you still schedule 3 races a horse?
No. So
Okay,
I
so
came
that
in,
was
you could
right
only have a
after.
horse and one horse per race. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I,
that
I got
was
I got in right before my wife's birthday, which is August 30th. So it was probably 2 or
okay.
3 days before her birthday was right around the time I got in.
Okay. Yeah, so you missed that too. So yeah, you didn't have to weather all the storms.
Yeah. But I think I came in at probably in one of the toughest or most non-new user friendly, quote unquote, racing
Absolutely.
environment. So it was definitely tough then.
Yeah.
I think it's tough now, but it's a different kind of tough. So I think the new comer at least has the freeze where they're not going to lose a ton of money
Yeah.
and learning. Whereas when I came in, I think I ended up down in like negative 0.25 ETH almost
Oof.
in like 2.5 months.
Yeah.
Just taking the hits. And like I was racing a horse that I looked at earlier last week that was like, it's like a 3 or 4% win rate. And I ran it like 300 times in 250 races. So it was like, what am I doing here? Like, why am I just tossing away free money? I could have taken that money and bought 2 or 3 good horses and been way better off than I am now.
How has your strategy changed since you came into the game versus now? Are there things you look for, things you avoid?
Yeah, so now, I mean, back then I was looking at like strictly win rates. And the big kind of change, and this is really a change I've had maybe the last month and a half, is more analyzing like, why is this horse good and why is this horse winning? Because then once you start learning those ins and outs, like, is this horse winning because it's got great variance? Or is this horse winning because it's got distance preference and a little bit of base ability? Or is this like a high base ability horse? Knowing those aspects of like why a horse is winning can really kind of help you have a little bit more predictable model of, one, like what is the class limit? Like where's this horse's potential? Can this horse down class to high class 4 and then run up into the middle of class 2, high class 2, and then down again? Or is this strictly a horse that's going to have, basically like a 1 class window? That's what I'm looking at now. Ideally for me, I want a horse with the current free structure that can run in 2 classes. So I want a horse that I can take in class 3 at the bottom, run all the way up into class 4, maybe win a race, end up in class 1, and that would be 2 or 3 tournaments hopefully. And then I can down class that horse all the way back down again over the course of maybe 1 or 2 tournaments, so that I'm still getting 4 or 5 quality days of racing where that horse can consistently qualify, and then take advantage of those quarterfinals and hopefully some semifinals to make that money back and keep that ROI positive going.
What kind of tournament success have you had?
I made the first finals this week actually, which is exciting.
Nice. Me too.
One of my it was a cool feeling, a cool experience. I mean, I knew the horse that got there was capable. It was just I never hit the variance rolls I needed to get there. In fact, the horse had actually never come out of the quarters, because it would flame finish 8th, flame finish 8th. I joke, if I flame in these tournament races, it's either a win or it's an 8th. There's no in between a lot of times.
Right.
So getting to that finals was pretty cool. That was fun, and it was a nice ETH injection into the stable too. So I can't argue with that.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, right? Like you can make money for nothing, except for a whole bunch of your time, and that's hard for someone who's actually trying to either pay back an investment into the game or grow a stable. But at the same time, it's really hard to be mad about making money for free, just investing time, right?
Yeah,
It's kind of like one of
totally,
those things. What do you have? If you have the time to grind, then grind and see what you can pull off.
Totally. And in every game I've ever played, I've been a grinder. Like FIFA, I was a trader. So I think that's kind of where some of the market stuff comes from. Playing the card market, just like same thing as playing the horse market. Find things that are undervalued now that might have value later. Or, find a horse at 50 races that you think's pretty good, run it 100 or 200 times, and then see if you can flip it for, 25, 50, or sometimes even like double profit. Like I have a few horses now that I think I bought at 0.1 that I think I could definitely get 0.2, 0.3 for now for sure.
Now, have you always been kind of like a flip hustler, trade markets with anything from like sports cards to whatever it was when you first started?
Never in like sports cards. I collected Pokemon cards. I've got a bunch sitting at the house now that I keep joking like I need to get graded. But the more I look at grading, I'm like, I don't want to spend $150 a card to get graded because I'm terrified it's going to come back like a 4 and be worth like $10,
Right.
and I'll be eating that cost. But in my day-to-day life, I'm a revenue manager for a hotel company, so
Okay.
like that data and that like looking at the markets and seeing what's the most I can get out of XYZ and ABC has always been kind of a thing for me. And selfishly, like that money aspect of like, hey, I want to make as much as I can in this. I'd love to have a situation where I can go part-time with my work or quit my job and just race horses full-time. I think that's the dream for all of us in this space.
Yeah.
But that doesn't have to be either, which is the great thing. You can look at it from a poker aspect too. If I go to the casino and throw $250 down at a poker table, and I come back with 245, and I gambled with a couple buddies for 3 or 4 hours, I'm pretty happy. I spent less than a Big Mac meal for 3 or 4 hours of entertainment, had a good time. So
Yeah.
Zed can be like that too. Um, a lot of people think people need to make money for this game to win. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think if people can break even and the quality of the product's good enough, people will break even and keep coming back.
Right. Yeah, and really in the beginning, that was the main thing for me. Like I know where I want to get everything to, and I've kind of had a strategy since day one that was a little bit unique compared to what a lot of the other bigger stables are doing. But like as long as I'm not losing the house in the process from getting to A to B, like I'm gonna be here doing what everybody else is doing, right? I think a lot of people maybe have a misperceived expectation of how fast certain things are possible because they didn't understand the ages of when people came in, right? Like you used to be able to race unlimited, and that's when racing was easy and the fields were soft because I had horses that were 20% winners that only ran 2 or 3 times a day because I was worried about preserving win rate. To where if I would have ran their hose off, they probably would be close to 1/8 profit, but I didn't. I was running two
Yeah,
or three times a day because I didn't know it was going to change, right? And like even the racing environment last month, I think was probably the hardest and the least profitable per stable that didn't run in tournaments that we've probably seen since when you first came in
yeah. Are
because
you saying
the
last
field
month
just
being February or January?
February was probably the
Yeah.
hardest day-to-day racing month we've seen in a long time.
Oh, I would totally agree, and I think part of that too was that class reset. That class
Yeah.
reset coming through like in what was it? Right around Valentine's Day, I want to say. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you had 2 months where horses in class one were not class one horses. They probably weren't even class three horses. And then
Yeah.
horses in classes 3 and 4 were all the former monsters in C1 that were like, you know what? We had distance preference. We're gonna abuse our distance preference and just take full advantage of those 250s and fives. Um, yeah, go on.
No, I was gonna say, well, and we saw some of the reverse happen. Like some horses that were just high variance horses, but couldn't make out of the old class 4 or class 5 system, accidentally land in 2 and 1. Like that happened with a lot of my variance horses. They just hit a high variance roll in 3 races, pulled like 4 podiums out of 10 races, and freaking ended up in the middle of class 2. And I'm like, yeah, that's not gonna work.
And heaven forbid you have a mid distance horse who can't downclass if distance preference horses are trying to lose.
Right.
So like you're running your 1800-meter specialist in 26s, and you're pulling flames and winning, and the horse is a class 4 horse, but it's getting discovered in class 1 or class 2. And like I
Yeah.
still have horses I can't get out. I've got a horse that I've got it into class 3. I started downing it. The horse is currently I think it's in class 1 right now, and I haven't run a race I've wanted to win in the entire month of February or March so far.
Yeah.
So
And
it's stuck.
I'm happy that they are trying things now, though, because there for a while they just talked about all these changes that were coming, and then they would either turn them on a lot sooner than they said they're going to. Like when they first reactivated breeding, they gave us a hard date, and then like a week early, they just turned it on. It was like, oh, by the way, breeding's live now. And it's like,
Yeah,
well, we thought
surprise!
we
Like
had.
here we
I
go.
thought I had a week to buy more horses. Like, what are you talking about? It's live. So I'm happy they're willing to try things and mess it up, like with the Premier Cup, right? Like they probably weren't ready to do that, but the community said we needed something, so they gave us something, right? And we're gonna see how it works.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I think it's tough. Granted, I don't know if you've seen all the blow up over the rule with the only one horse per race kind of thing, and it
yeah,
was kind of slotted into the bottom. I feel bad for some of those stables because I'm sure it wasn't intentional. In fact, I know some stables um, weren't doing that. They were really like, especially with the pony plug event coming up next week, they were really just testing like this horse versus this horse. Who's going to be my 1200, 1600, 2400? They're just trying to figure out which horse they're going to designate for that race. And in the process of trying to figure that out, they've quote unquote disqualified themselves. And I don't know if we know for sure that Zed's going to do that or not. I think the right thing to do is give it a slap on the wrist since it kind of was an unprecedented tournament in that regard.
yeah. And Zed has a history of poor communication, right? This isn't the
Yep.
first time that they launched an event. The rules were slightly different than the previous event, and they didn't make it known to double check the rules, because it is different than what you're used to. So I understand there is a diligence on the stable owners to start reading the fine print before we enter a horse into a race.
Yep.
But at the same time, like if if you're gonna play, you know, game manager and have this ecosystem that you're building, and you don't want certain things to happen, like the community's shown that we're going to do whatever's going to make us the most money. Like it's been happening. You have people running 2 stables to be able to qualify horses that normally couldn't qualify. Back when breeding had no limits, people were breeding Z1 Nakamoto's for, $70. Like absolutely
Yeah.
ludicrous. When breeding was cheap, everybody bred every single horse, and we quadrupled the size of the population. And now some horses just aren't worth anything. And you still see it. Like how many Griffins have Z268s in it?
A
Like,
ton.
right?
I
So
think the
like,
average Griffin field's over a 150 right now.
yeah. So it's just it's hard. Like there's two parties of responsibility, and at the end of the day, what are you gonna do? We just gotta move on. We're not gonna be talking
Yeah,
about this in 2 years.
exactly right. I hope not anyway. If we are, we've got a much bigger problem than than what than any of us want to really admit to right now.
Yeah. So you brought up the Pony Plug guys, and I know you're kind of helping with the March Madness event a little bit. How important has the community-based events been to kind of your pleasure into the game and making it fun and seeing those things grow?
Yeah. So I mean, admittedly, probably to my own fault, and also because I don't feel like I've got a horse that really can compete at that level of like the zombie tournaments. Um, so I haven't really entered a lot of those, but the free based event, like the Dan Shan's, I think it was Dan Shan. I think he had a maiden event. I think it was a maiden. Like that was really fun. The Metaverse Gaming guys, like I love their smoke show events. Um, this event coming up for March Madness, especially with the charity aspect associated with it, is going to be really cool. The seating committee is going to be pretty fun. That's going to be a fun thing that we're going to roll out on Sunday night into Monday.
Yeah.
With seating the actual bracket and creating that bracket, I think it just brings a little extra flair, and I think that's something Zed needs sometimes. It can get, like we've said before, it can get really monotonous. Just tournament coverage day in day out. There's really not that much different 7 days a week. So having those little special events and those little special, that special show each week or every couple weeks of like, hey, we're rolling out this event. We're going to have this go on. It brings that extra little bit of flair and that little bit of spice to the ecosystem that I think it needs at times. And it also gets more eyes on it. I think I've said before, I think where Zed really goes huge is if you can start getting more people in the actual horse racing industry on board.
Yeah.
You get some of those guys in, which with the Larry Colmus is going to be a big. You get some of that kind of stuff happening. The sky's the limit there, because then you're getting eyes even from a marketing standpoint. You're getting Budweiser eyes in. You're getting of course we've already got NASCAR in, but you're getting sky's the limit there in terms of marketing atmospheres and the kind of different promo stuff you can do. You could eventually see a Zed race as a feature at the Kentucky Derby. That would be amazing.
Yeah, and I've been joking around with after watching that music show Alter Ego, where they had the
Yeah.
holographic people on stage. Like we're probably not that far away from having some sort of 3D indoor races being ran, or that's the capability too, right? Like who's going to build up the stage for it first? But it's definitely something interesting. And I know Ebbs has talked about in an interview he did. I can't remember the name of the show off the top of my head, but he was talking about how they've pretty much already built out the capability with the new Apple glasses coming out, to where you'll be able to put them on and walk by certain. Like the goal would be to be walking through downtown Vegas and look up with your glasses and be able to see a race being ran over top of your head, right? Like
Yes,
they've
that's so
already
cool.
built that type of capability into their tech. They're just waiting for tech to catch up.
Yeah. I mean, the sky's the limit there, but obviously you're looking at trying to leverage millions, if not billions, at that point for that tech to go full circle.
Yeah.
You got to get a big adopter from somewhere to get it in the face of people who aren't into NFTs, which
Yep.
I think horse racing, and I'm somewhat biased too. I grew up in Kentucky as well. Went to college in Lexington. Go Cats! They're playing tonight. But I think you get this in front of those people. One, it's that little bit of that gambling side that comes out, but two, they've got the money to go in, and it brings in a whole new masses that probably would never be into NFTs or into the crypto space to begin with.
Right. And this is kind of like I feel like Web3 is kind of like social media back in the day, right? Like almost nobody accepted Twitter and MySpace and whatever else was out now. And now, like, my grandma's on TikTok.
Yeah,
Like, like, so it's one of those things where everyone's going to ignore until it's fully integrated into life and they don't have a choice. And we're just lucky enough to be witnessing it, back when you had to have an email account to be able to get on
yep,
Facebook.
totally. I remember those days. Oh, and it's kind of one of those things too. If you would have told me, when I was a sophomore in high school, that in 2022 I would spend more time watching live content on the internet than I would watching television, I'd have probably told you were crazy.
Right.
I probably watch way more live content online between like podcasts and streams and things like that than I consume anything on my television in a normal week.
Oh yeah, or amateur creator pre-recording. Kind of like what I do with my show. Like,
Yeah, exactly right.
absolutely. I have almost no use for standard television except for like the 3 shows that the one show I watch and
Yeah.
then the 1 or 2 that I watch with my wife. Like, there's no reason to.
Yes, you extrapolate that out another 10, 15 years. I can't even fathom. I think, one of the things, I was a history guy growing up, and it was Robert McNamara said you have like known knowns, you have unknown knowns, and you have unknown unknowns. So it's one
Yeah.
of those things of like, you know what you know what you don't know. There's a ton of things that you don't even know about that you don't even know exist or that are even possible. And I
Yep.
think, when you put that into the Web3 space of like, we have no idea what this space is going to look like in 8 years or 10 years. Um, Ready Player One's probably not that far off. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Ready Player One,
Yep.
or have read the books or seen the movies, but the tech's almost there, which is kind of crazy, considering that came out and got really popular. I feel like in the last probably decade or so.
Yeah. When was the original book written?
I want to say 80s, but I could be totally wrong there.
I think that's when the original premise came out. And the craziest thing for me is I feel like it could have already been here if all the big companies weren't so worried about intellectual property, right? Because it's
Yeah,
like in video games, you would essentially be able to transition assets from one game to the other. It's not that complicated. It's just the ownership aspect that's new, right?
yep.
Like, if you have a really rare X in Diablo 3, why couldn't you use it in Diablo 2? Or, vice versa. So I feel like it should have been here already. Just egos and legal stuff.
And that's what makes the NFT space so dynamic and so unique in that regard. Is any of those games that you play, whether it's FIFA or World of Warcraft or you mentioned Diablo, you have the rights to play it, but they still own all the content.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go through and do something that gets you kicked off, or you're doing illegal things to the game, they can ban you from that, and you've got no legal right to that property, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Whereas now with NFTs, yes, Zed could kick you off the platform in theory, but they really can't take the physical NFT from you. So you could still go through and resell that, and that NFT still holds whatever value it would have in the community.
Yeah. I think that last one's a little bit up to debate based on the new terms of service.
True. Yes.
But I think that's also the important part too. Like, just because we're Web3 and things exist on the blockchain doesn't mean it's fully decentralized. And it's up to ourselves to not only educate ourselves on what the difference is, but understanding when we're investing in a project, which ones actually give us full use rights, which ones actually give us, the ability to do whatever the heck we want with it, and where do we have to kind of pay attention, kind of like what we've talked about earlier with like the Zed Run race. We thought the people in class 1, for the vast majority, thought they knew what they were doing. They did what they do every single day, and it ended up being in some sort of violation. So never assume, like you said, you don't know what you don't know, especially when you don't know it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's tough, I mean, and you're seeing some of that now with some of the political stuff going on in the Ukraine, and even some of the stuff that's happened here in North America, where some of these decentralized wallets, quote unquote, are still getting their access revoked and still getting their abilities to pull from those wallets, prohibited. They're getting blocked out of that funding.
Yeah.
So decentralization now is definitely a much muddier term, I think, than it was maybe 5 years ago.
Yeah, probably. And I'm new to the space, so that's why I try to avoid talking about too much technical stuff when it comes to Web3, because I definitely don't have the education or the background to speak on it. But it's definitely a learning curve for everybody coming into the
Yeah,
space.
and it's going to continue to be that way. As soon as you think you know it, something new is going to come out that's totally going to blow the space and turn it 180 on its head. And I think that's good for the space. I think that's a sign that the space is going to continue to move forward. It's going to continue to grow. Um, I first got into crypto a few years ago. I guess it would have been probably 2017, and it's totally different now, even than it was then.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people say, it's a flash in the pan. 2020, it's not going to be around. It's not going to be worth what it is now. And it's getting to the point now. It's lasted 4 or 5 years. I don't think really anybody in economic circles are saying crypto's going to go away anytime soon. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's here to stay.
My first experience was buying Dogecoin on Robinhood for $4 and flipping it in and out on its way up to the Saturday Night Live, and I sold 2 hours before Saturday Night Live. So that was my first crypto endeavor before I found NFTs.
Yeah,
So nothing too crazy.
Yeah, mine was XRP and Tron in 2017, and we lost our butts.
Okay.
And then we basically took all that money. We finally found a way to get it out because when the SEC has their lawsuit, I think it's still ongoing with XRP. It was they took it off all the exchanges in the U.S., which I didn't know. I just had the money sitting there, and I was like, oh, it's going to do what it's going to do. I'm just going to let it sit as a long-term hold. Well, then when I realized I couldn't withdraw, I had to get creative with it. I was finally able to get the money out. And that's when I got into Zed. I said, we're just going to put this money into Zed and see what happens. And it's been a good decision so far. So we're ROI positive on that. And as long as that stays that way, I'll be here for the long term.
Now, what type of so you're talking about different market filters and stuff. I know you posted, I don't remember when it was, but I saw your post about the top Z1 breeders based on X amount of offspring. I can't remember the exact way it was worded.
Yes, I think then it was probably 100 or maybe 150 offspring.
Yeah.
I'd probably do it at like 200 now. But that's using Zedge tool, which I think's one of those things. Like anyone new that I have that comes through, my Twitch feeds, I basically, what, if you're going to breed and you're going to spend the money to breed, don't breed one horse and buy Zedge for 90 days.
Yeah.
Because you're going to benefit from it.
Makes sense.
But yes, yeah, it's the filters you can build both with Zedge and with Haku, I think, are really cool, and you can find some good value there.
Yeah, and it's interesting too to see how the tools expand, because I know when Zedge first came out, I was part of the beta test group, and I liked it, but it didn't exactly work for the way that I looked at horses. But it looks nothing today, and its functionality is nothing today like it was during the beta group. Like, so patience definitely wins in this space, because like when we started, Haku wasn't even out. Like, at least not when I started.
There was so no you were what, like May, I think? Is that about right?
Yeah, that's when I first started diving in. If it wasn't very well known. Let's put it that way.
So but I did have that luxury, I think, which I think is something that I'm blessed in that regard in the world of Zed, because I had Know Your Horses up, functional, and pretty well fleshed out. Haku was still really good. It's funny because even when that was going on, like the first horses I bought, I was going onto OpenSea looking for like what I was looking for, quote unquote, and then like looking the horses up individually on all those websites, which was a chore. And I think that's part of that learning curve too, is like teaching people like how do you use these sites in the most effective way to find what you're looking for.
Yep. And that's a big thing, right? Education. Like it's been the common theme, today with other people, finding the right people to learn from, learning the right information, and not trying to do too much before you have a grasp on it, right? Like dip your toe in, get some experience under your belt, then make some big moves. Because it's just so easy to make a wrong one if you don't know what you're looking for.
Yeah, so like I think I don't remember who it was that said it, but like you talk about, so you're going to come in with half of an ETH. What are you going to use it on? And I would say save yourself 0.1 to 0.15 so that once you've learned all your mistakes, you can offload those mistakes and then have that little bit of money left over to buy something that you really want. Because you're going to make a ton of mistakes early. You're going horses at the wrong races. You're going to use the wrong entry fees. You're not going to realize when you've hit the point you should down class and you're going to get up too high. You're going to make those mistakes. It's just part of the game, I think. So I think that I think that's great advice there.
Well, and it's a crazy now, like looking at market prices now. Like most of my horse purchases have been on the wrong side of the market. And like you can get a legendary Buterin for what, 0.01 right now that's raced. Like 0.01 for
Yeah,
training wheels, that's a pretty damn good deal in the
yeah,
history that we've been a part of, right? Like that I remember selling donkey legendary Buterins for like 0.08 and they didn't even have inflated stats at one point.
yeah. I mean, I remember, like, I think when I got in back in August, legendary Buterin under like a 14 was like almost 0.15, 0.13. If it had any kind of win rate at all, like we're talking 8% win rate, like break even horses, we're going for almost 10x what they're going for now. So I could have
Yeah.
bought 10 horses now for what I bought my first horses at then.
Yeah, I think I bought an exclusive Z17 Buterin for 0.12 and it had like a 20% win rate, I think, back then, which we know doesn't hold up to what today's environment is.
Yeah.
But like I thought I was getting a steal for 0.12. And yeah, it's not the case in today's environment at all. That's a 0.01 to 0.008 horse.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, horses went from like a $250 minimum buy-in to what now, like 40, maybe
Mm,
35.
yeah.
I even think the legendary Buterin unraced unnamed, I think, is still under 0.2. I'm not even sure if it might be under, or I'm sorry, 0.02. I think it might be under like 0.018 even.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very affordable now to get in and get your feet wet and dip your toes in if you want to come in with just a couple $100, which it wasn't when I got in. I'm sure it wasn't when you first got in.
No, not at all. And I'm curious to see too how the burn mechanic affects, because we know the supply is going to shrink. I've talked to some bigger stables that have no intention on ever selling a donkey once the burn mechanic comes in, regardless of how little the return is, just because there is a way to recoup some sort of investment. So I feel like a lot of the secondary market not only disappears, but it never is as liquid as it is now until we get full adoption, which worries me.
Yeah, yeah. So I think the burn mechanic's going to be way lighter than people think it is, and I think if you can sell a donkey for 0.008 or you can burn it for 0.003, I think the only real difference for me anyway is, do I want that name or not? If it's going to be a situation where I get to keep that horse name, then it's a totally different story.
Yeah.
And I could see some horses getting burned or getting sold on the market for their names even.
Well, even if they don't remove the name mechanic, one thing that I've been really bullish on is colors, names, and name color combinations. Because when horse renting becomes a thing, and Joe Schmo off the street doesn't run horses, but his friend who comes over does, and he wants to rent a horse for the day, the night, the weekend, whatever it is, he doesn't know anything about the game, so he's not going to deep dive stats. He's going to look for names that he recognizes and colors that are his favorites. And I think at scale that plays out, like early on with horse renting, it probably isn't going to. But when you have, 25% of your users not actually own a stable of their own and like play the game of Zed, they just rent horses and run on the weekends with their buddies. Like I think that's where names really become important and colors really become important, even if there isn't a true value of it in Zed.
Totally. I hadn't thought about that, but that would be kind of cool. And even, I mean, you brought this up, but take it one step further. I've always wanted one of the what is it, the dark chocolate horses, or the what's
Mm-hmm.
the full black? I forget what the name is for now for the full black. I'm
Uh,
blanking.
it's not the Midnight Black, is it?
Oh yeah, midnight black, or
Yeah.
even like one of the chartreuse. It'd be cool if when you burned a horse, if you could get the name and like the skin of that color, and you could take some of your other horses and reskin them, and it would just be like, and it would show skinned somehow, like
Oh
just
wow.
even in parentheses,
Yeah.
like skinned, where you could make your favorite horse that's brown, you could make it chartreuse or midnight black if you wanted to by using the
That get crazy.
skin from another horse, which would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
But then
And
that
that's
takes
why
away some of your breeding for colors aspects that people do as well.
yeah. And like as everything expands, after there's enough people in the ecosystem, enough horses, like we're gonna get color coded tournaments and everything down the road, right?
Yep.
If Zed doesn't do it once party mode's available, like we're all gonna do it to some capacity. So like it's gonna happen. Like I easily see, as long as Zed doesn't put a kibosh on it, one of these groups getting freaking somebody like Starbucks to sponsor a race or Dunkin' Donuts to sponsor a race, and it has to be like a latte colored horse because it's a
Yeah,
Starbucks sponsored race. You know what I mean?
totally.
Like Oreo sponsoring a race, and it has to be like a midnight black or a dark chocolate or something,
Yep.
or it has to be like a was it anti-flash white? That's a really bright white, so that way it's either the cream or the chocolate, right?
Yeah.
Like we're gonna see unique stuff like that come into the ecosystem. So all these, I think a lot of these debates will end, and a lot of
Yeah.
these
I mean,
frustrations with like, oh, what color doesn't matter. Well, if it did, like, I think some stables would be in really big trouble that are in good position today.
you see, I don't care about color. If I get a cool color, it's great. Just let the horse make me some money, and I'm a happy camper. It could be plain Jane, a brown
Right.
horse. I have a brown horse named Brownie, who's my most profitable horse in my entire stable on an everyday
There you
basis.
go.
And it's the most plain Jane horse you'll see on the track.
Yeah. I keep on breeding purple horses. It doesn't matter what color the stud is. It's either a pink or a purple hue. Just that's what I
Yeah.
produce for some reason.
See, all mine are some shade of like brown or tan. If you look through my stable, it's tan, brown, cafe au lait, whatever it is. Like they're all
Yep.
some hue of brown or like light tan, which is just kind of funny.
Yeah, it actually is. I'm looking right now. So, what's your stable strategy been building out your stable then?
So right now, I was breeding everything. Um, recently, I've offloaded. So I had, and at one point, I had almost like 25, 30 horses. I don't remember what it was. So I ended up just offloading a lot of my donkeys. One, I just hated scrolling through them. Um, two, so my streaming concept for a while, my stable strategy there for a while was like the road to the Z2 leg. Because at one point, you could buy a Z2 leg for, I think it was like 0.33,
Mm-hmm.
unraced, unnamed, to try and find something with parents I was comfortable with, race it, breed it, see what happens. So basically, have it for a month, maybe 2 months, to see kind of what the trends panned out with. And then if it didn't work out, you could sell it and only take a 0.05 loss.
Yeah.
Which, for that kind of a horse, your upside, I think, is worth taking the hit on the 0.05 side, especially if you can spread that hit out over 45 to 90 days, kind of a thing. Now those differentials are a little more extreme. And then with the breeding update, I really kind of want to see, does an exclusive with super high variance carry some of the same ability to breed as, say, a Z2 legendary with decent base ability? Does that make
Mm.
sense?
I see what you're
And
saying.
seeing kind of how those traits get passed, because if that's the case, you may not need a Z2 legendary to create other great horses. If you can get a Z10 exclusive, a Z11 exclusive, or even some of your legendaries that have good distance preference or good variance, and then be able to pass those traits down, I think it takes some of that demand off of needing those super low Z numbers. So I've kind of put that on the back burner for now, and now it's just kind of accumulating ETH. And if I see good deals on the market, I'm of course buying it. But just kind of letting the ETH sit and accumulating some income right now.
Yeah, and prices on even those are crazy. Like I remember when you couldn't get a Z1 Colt for less than an ETH or a Z2 Legendary Colt for less than an ETH, and I think we just picked one up a month ago for 0.39 unraced, unnamed.
Yeah, and I think they're 0.4 right now. I think I was looking last night. I think they were 0.4.
Yeah,
There was only a handful there at 0.4. In fact, I think what I was seeing, and that was all, of course, that was for stallion as well. So you're not going to get a mare at that price.
yeah. No, mine was a Colt. We got a Z3 Legendary mare for 0.35. I think we snagged real quick.
Yeah, I'm keeping an eye out, and I think it's an area that's probably undervalued right now. Is actually that stallion market in Z2s. I believe it was Dan Shan who mentioned at one point this week or late last week, the Z2 leg mare market had like 4 horses till the 1/8 floor. So you're
Yeah.
looking at a stallion at 0.4 and a potential 3 or 4 buyers come through, and your mares are going to be worth almost an ETH, which is a pretty
Well,
crazy spread.
so right now, it's early mid March. I think it was back in November, late December. I said by the end of this year we'll see probably $1,000 minimums for Nakamoto stud fees Genesis. And
Oh yeah,
like now you can't get a Z1 for less than I think 0.15 is the lowest. And I've been checking the Z2s. I think Z2 Genesis you have like 15 maybe at floor, and then it quickly goes to that 0.15 mark. So like we're getting there, and then once you're able to burn Z2s, like that gets dangerous. So I know for me, one of my more recent things that I do is pretty much anytime I go to the computer or I'm getting on my phone for anything Z related, I just go to the Haku parent filters and search for Genesis Nakamoto parent and see what pops up. And in doing so, a little over a month ago, I was able to get a Z11 exclusive butyrin that had Zion as the father for 0.03.
That's awesome. How's it run for you?
So I haven't been running it. It has a pretty good win rate on its own already, so I'm kind of preserving that. But I just got it for the name factor, right? Like
Oh, totally.
that, and it's in my stud program. Like it's sold out every single month. Like the first month I took all the covers. This month, as soon as it went up, everybody was buying from it. So it's been fun to watch play out. And I still think, like, if you think of the Genesis horses, especially things like the Nakamotos and the really high end Zabos, like the best of the best are like your premier athletes, and being able to get any type of offspring off of them to me is almost like collecting their card, right?
Yep.
So if you can get legendaries, or like the one horse I bought, Blockchain Builders, a Z4 exclusive that has both Grandor and Third Head in it, and I paid like close to floor for raced exclusive Nakamotos. Like that might not matter today, but because a lot of these horses like Billions have been bred a ton. But when the ecosystem grows and people want some of that iconic bloodline, even if there wasn't a breeding update, like I feel like that matters. Because if it didn't, rookie cards wouldn't matter. Because what is
Exactly
there
right.
in really owning a rookie card? Not a whole lot. Like it's bragging rights at the end of the day. It's owning a piece of history, you know.
Yep.
And that's always been kind of like part of my strategy, is just collecting history pieces.
Yeah, no, and I think that's a really cool strategy that I've never employed in my stable, but it's kind of funny. I was looking at my stable bloodlines and found out a couple months ago that like I've got a horse. It's a Z6 Elite knock, and terms of engagement is one of the grandparents on the
Nice.
on one side, and then this new breeding update came out, and I was like, ooh, please let us pull some grandparent DNA, because it's a pretty good
Yeah.
base ability racer in itself already. I mean, it can flame anywhere from 1,016. So I think, it could be a good breeder, but because it's an elite right now, it hasn't made sense to breed an elite knock in my stable, because I know that my likelihood of getting anything worth the breed cost is probably slim to none. But kind of going back to your point a few minutes ago, it's going to be interesting to see when this breeding reset happens, because of how expensive the Genesis knock blood is. I think Z2 legs, for the most part, I think it's probably an underbred stallion. So it's going to be really interesting to see how the breakdowns of some of these Z2 legendaries compare with like your Genesis Zabos. Because price points, you're not that far off. I want to say at floor, it's like 40 or $50, which for some people might be a lot. But when you're looking at breeding that caliber of a horse, it's not huge. But I don't know if we've had a ton of like Z2s bred and tinkered with in terms of like breeding from the stud barn. So it's going to be interesting to see how that pans out. I mean, I see a situation when breeding gets reset with this new update, there won't be a Genesis in the barn, I don't think. I'll be very surprised if there's a Genesis Zabo or Knack in the entire stud barn.
Yeah, the quantity is definitely, and you're already seeing it, right? Like a lot of the bigger stables have been, they've bred enough, they've raced enough, they've won tournament money enough to where they've been able to scoop up what they want. And because they want it, it goes in the stud barn, and they either use all three covers or they exchange the covers for, breed deals that they want to do. And the horses don't get studded to the public for very long. And like there's going to be a point in time where there's no Genesis really sitting in the stud barn for more than the full 7-day window, just because of supply and demand. Like we're still a very small game. I don't think people realize how small from a gaming perspective we are. And like Zed said, like they've intentionally not been making a huge marketing push. And whenever there's an accidental marketing push, it kind of breaks the system temporarily.
Yep.
But when they have the confidence to use a lot of these partnerships they have to bring in attention. Like it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, what do you have any idea what the last count was on horses? Have we broke 300,000 yet?
I can look right now.
Well, or will we have good numbers because of the reset?
I don't think we have good numbers because of the legacy collection.
Because one thing I was thinking was like right now, let's say you have 250,000, which I feel like is probably a good guess while you're looking it
So
up.
I bred horse 350,982 last at the beginning of the week.
Okay.
So we're almost at
So
400,000.
yeah, so we're 400,000 horses right now. If there's what 26,000 Genesis currently out
That are going to be released to the public. Yeah,
yeah.
roughly.
So Genesis right now are roughly is that 8%, 7% of the horses in total right now are Genesis. Whereas 6 months from now, if we make a marketing push, you might be going from 8% to less than 1%.
Yeah.
Which then even further values those Z2, Z3, Z4 legendaries because, like you had said, and I think at that point, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're in a situation where breeds can't get sniped, where I can either put a passcode on a breed and give it to a friend, and he has to know that passcode in order to breed that horse, or I can reserve that horse for for a certain stable kind of thing.
Yeah, I just really hope they don't do 100% private breeding. Just
Yeah,
because
you should be able to reserve two, but one should go public. Would be my thought.
Yeah. They just have to keep some sort of mechanic for the public, I feel. But
Yeah.
even with the breeding update, one of the things that I'm most fascinated to see is with how breeding decay works. Because like John Lee said, in the simulation, good breeders can breed well beyond the final stage of decay. But based on human behavior, he doubts anybody will go past stage 1 of decay just because the perceived value. Just like a lot of people don't breed exclusive studs or elite studs because the perceived value of producing a cross pacer elite it just isn't there perceived value wise, right? But we've seen good ones be able to perform on the track, at least in tournament settings and some paid scenarios. So when the breeding update happens and legendaries can breed for potentially 2 or 3 years is what it's sounding like, maybe 4, and exclusives only have maybe 1 year of breeding on them. How does the market behave on buying something that say has half its breeds already gone? Or what does the value of a horse like a legendary that can breed for 3 years do versus say an exclusive because it can't breed forever, right? Like how does the market behave with that? And that's going to be a fun experiment, I guess we can call it, to see how it plays out.
It really is, and it's so funny. Like you hit the nail on the head there with the exclusives and like the perceived value on an exclusive. If you look at what's there for sale right now, there's exclusives that if you would just change the title next to that horse with all the exact same stats, same Z number from exclusive to legendary, it probably doubles in value.
And that's one thing that Dan Shin's talked a lot about. Like he doesn't believe in the whole bloodline and breed type at all. He thinks that's just a fun way to organize Z number and to kind of like give it meaning. But he says, from everything he's seen, for the vast majority, like obviously not all rules apply always, but the Z number has more to tell than the breed type and everything else.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I would take a low Z like 8 or 9 exclusive, either Finney or Zabo, which a Finney is going to have, that number is going to have a lot of good blood built into it just to keep that number that low. Before I would take, say, like a Z10 Finney or a Z10 Zabo. Well, I guess you couldn't get a Z10 Zabo, but you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
That exclusive level and the legendary level is not that different. And if you breed smart, a lot of times you can breed a better horse than you would sometimes by using the right combinations.
Yeah, and like every time I want to give up on breeding for like a month, another horse like Wavelength pops up that's just, it's a random Buterin Z18. And it's like, well, shit, I've bred 15 of those. Maybe 16 will be good.
Nope, you're totally right. Well, and it's just funny. Like, you just kind of got to experiment and keep taking your swings sometimes. I don't like to experiment a lot below the elite level. So, like, kind of going off the Enshan's point, you see horses all the time pop through that are Z12 exclusives, Z13 exclusives that are really good horses. Like I've got a Z13 elite that just hit a distance preference roll that can run through Z2. just kind of one of those things. But I think your hit rates go down a lot. So like
Yeah.
you might get one good horse breeding smart out of 7 or 8 at the exclusive level. At elite, you might have to breed it 15, 16 times. I think it's exponential in that regard.
Yeah.
You could use the same pairs of parents. At legendary, maybe 1 and 3 is good. At exclusive, it's 1 and 8. At elite, you're looking at 1 and 16. So
I
on
think
and
we're
so
going to see
forth.
a lot of that still with the breeding update. I think that might be something that a lot of people are going to overestimate, because I know Dan Sham put out a post where he showed like the same horses bred together every single time for like 13 months straight and how consistent the results were. And that's the weird thing too, like you were saying earlier on about understanding why a horse is good. Like why a horse performs on the track can change a lot, especially with like the new breeding update. Like just because a pairing worked once and maybe shouldn't have, post update doesn't mean that you shouldn't try again with the same pairing. And that's something I don't think we see a lot of unless it's like built a superstar horse, where people just kind of keep breeding the same two horses together until they get something they want out of it. Because
Yeah,
like,
and
oh, it didn't work one time, it's never going to work. But it's like, is that really the
yeah,
case?
yeah. Because like I have a horse right now, the Ritual, one of my kind of stable horses that I run every day within my stable. Really good breeder. It's a Z9 legendary Buterin that comes from that the KYH guys sold me a few months back, and it's a pretty good breeder. But every single exclusive I've put out of that horse has been high base ability and a really tough down button. I think the horse, in terms of offspring, has it's probably over 300 races right now, and there's only 1/12 over 300 races, and we're talking about exclusive buttes that aren't losing races with any kind of frequency.
Yeah.
And none of them are big winners either, which is interesting. They love placing. They love that pity point section, like 2 through 6, but they hate 7 through 12.
Yep.
And
I definitely know
it's
exactly what you're talking about.
extremely consistent. Like the quality of the only thing that kind of fluctuates is I know I'm getting this much out of her. The amount of base ability I put into her dictates what I get out.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, we're already at an hour. We can definitely gonna have to schedule a round 2 because I think we can go all day on, especially on breeding.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I was about to say that last comment goes back to your point. Is like I've actually trimmed back some of the base ability using kind of your like stat point allocation logic of like, I'm going to try and trim out some of this base ability and see if I can just get a little distance preference or a little variance here, and just kind of see what happens with it, because like 2 or 3 of the offspring have gotten stuck and I haven't been able to do anything with them.
Yeah, I hate it when that happens too. It's like, well, I have a horse that's in 3. It won't go down, but also doesn't go up.
Yeah.
It only finishes like 2 through 8, and it only finishes in 2 when it's supposed to be going down.
Yeah, I've got one that will win in 3, will place in 2, but the placements, depending on the tournament, may or may not get you in.
Yep.
Doesn't like sprints, but will still win like one of every 4 or 5 sprints. It will just come out and win that race because of the way the ecosystem is right now. And of course, it's a mid-distance runner. It's an 1,800, 2,000 meter who also weirdly will flame but not win at 24 and 26 and 22.
Yep.
It's just it's a complicated thing with mids right now. But yeah, I can keep going, or if you've got stuff to do, we can schedule a round 2, whatever you want to do.
No, let's schedule a round 2 because unfortunately with my computer set up, if it goes too much longer, the video doesn't like to render.
Got it. Yeah, so. I don't want that for any of us. That's a pain in the butt. I don't do a lot of YouTube content, but that would be extremely frustrating when you get an interview done and you go to render it and it's like, okay, I've lost everything. This sucks.
It's all good. We'll make it work either way. But I really appreciate you coming on. I can't wait to have you back, and look forward to seeing what type of content you keep pushing.